Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and good evening everyone, and welcome to our 14th lecture in the Project Management Professional course. And this is of course the lecture before the last one. We're still discussing the executing and the monitoring and controlling of the project and the different project aspects. And of course, as usual, according to the project management plan that we have developed and we have approved and baselined. So basically we discussed the execution as a whole, the flow of information based on the work performance data that the execution would generate. So by analyzing this data, we will get information on the progress of the project and the progress of the different aspects of the project. And of course, this information will be used to take decisions as well, whether we are progressing well. So basically we continue with the same steps, or should we do some changes? And we reached to this point where we will discuss managing procurement during the execution of the project work. Now, of course, we have developed a procurement management plan in which we indicated what are the things that we will do ourselves and what are the things that we will buy, right? Make or buy decisions. And we also indicated in the plan how to select the contractors, what are the source selection criteria, and what kind of contracts should we use with the different contractors, and how to measure the performance and measure the performance of the contractors, of course, and how to make sure to coordinate the contractors' work and integrate the contractors' work within the other project work. So basically, let's start now by discussing the different aspects in procurement management. When we start executing the project, we will discuss holding bidder conferences. We will discuss the steps of the solution delivery. We will discuss how to control procurement and how to use a contract change control system that we have also integrated in the procurement management plan, and how to close procurement as well. So basically, when we developed the procurement management plan and indicated the, or developed even the statement of work, the SOW, and indicated the contractor selection criteria and so on, we have probably published this SOW or RFP, request for proposal. We have published it or sent it to different contractors so they can start bidding. Most of the time we use this process of bidding, to obtain the best proposal, to obtain the best technical and financial proposal. So when you do this, what you usually get is different questions about the job that needs to be done. Every contractor would have few questions here and there about the job, about the scope, about the financial terms, and so on. So if you want to answer each contractor separately, individually, then you're going to spend a lot of time doing that. So basically, to avoid that and to avoid talking to each contractor separately or individually, and probably that every contractor will end up with information that might be a little bit different from other contractors, we do, or we advise you to do, a bidder conference. Basically, this is a meeting that we do, that we conduct with the whole contractors that we have invited to bid, so that we can answer all of their questions, and so that everyone, all the contractors that are invited to bid, have the same information and have the same level of understanding of the job that needs to be done, and have an equal opportunity as well to submit their bids based on this information that now everyone has. There is no like specific information that has been sent to a specific contractor. No, all the contractors now come, attend, ask their questions, get their answers, and we have a common understanding of the job that needs to be done. And the contractors now can submit their bids based on this common understanding. And they have equal opportunity, as I mentioned. So this is basically what we mean by bidder conferences. It has also different names. You can call it vendor conferences, pre-bid conferences, pre-proposal conferences, and contract conferences. All mean the same thing. And this is the objective of holding a bidder conference. Okay. Now, of course, communication is very important with those contractors. It's a critical component of the procurement process. And we have also as well developed a communication management plan as one component of the project management plan. And the communication management plan should have indicated in it what kind or when would the contractor need to submit different information and different reports to us, like progress reports, for instance. So, because this is what we mentioned in the communication management plan, right? The communication management plan is who should know what, when, and by which means. So, as for the contractors, we should agree with them on what kind of reports that we need them to submit, and probably also provide them with templates for these reports and with the performance measurements that, or the performance metrics that we need them to submit as well, and so on, and how, for instance, the formal acceptance will be conducted based on the deliverables that they will submit, and so on. So basically, this is again a part of the communication management plan that we have developed already. So we also make sure that the communication management plan indicates that will how to communicate with the suppliers, with the contractors, and what kind of reports they need to submit, and when, and by which means again, okay? Another important thing that we also need to take into consideration, whether we're planning or whether we're executing the procurement, is the steps of delivery, of the solution delivery, right? So basically, and again, whether you are a buyer or a seller, and I mentioned to you, I think that if not otherwise mentioned, we consider that we are the buyers. We consider ourselves to be the buyers, right? If you get an exam question about procurement, then you assume all the time that you are the buyer, right? But sometimes you get the, the opposite scenario. Sometimes you are the seller. You are providing the service to a project owner, for instance. So basically, whether you are a buyer or a seller, you need to understand the following steps of delivery, of delivering the solution, whether you need to submit your proposal, for instance, or whether you want to start doing it, right? So basically, those are the steps as a supplier who wants to, deliver a solution to a project owner. First, again, and of course, we start by planning and analysis. So basically, the planning that we mentioned, like for instance, and the most important thing is understanding the customer's requirements and documenting them, okay? And then you start developing the detailed design of the solution that you want to submit. So the solution gets designed and gets documented. Third step is, after, of course, approval from the customer, or the other way around, again, whether you are a seller or a buyer, then the implementation or installation of the solution. So the solution is implemented or installed. And then we test it. So testing, solution should be tested. And then probably you need also to train the customer on how to use the solution or how to use the product that we have developed. So training is provided to the customer. And then there is a handover where the solution is formally handed over to the customer. And after that, there is a period of support and maintenance where the solution is transferred to the customer support and provided support whenever they need it. Okay, so these are the steps that should be followed. Again, whether you are a buyer or a seller, these are the steps that should be planned for, should be followed when there is a solution delivery in the project. Okay, that makes sense? Okay, so here are some guidelines about managing suppliers and contracts. First of all, index and store all contract correspondence for ease of retrieval. It's very important, especially in the procurement, relationship, that you maintain a complete record of all the communication that took place with the supplier or with the other party, because there is now a legal relationship, as you know. And for one reason or another, we might need to go to the court someday for a dispute, for instance, right? So in order to be ready for that moment at all times, you need to be very careful and to maintain a full and complete records of all the relationship with the contractor and, for instance, the correspondence that took place between us and the seller, or us as the buyer and the other party. Okay, so this is number one. Number two, develop and implement an effective contract change control system. Again, we will, of course, approve the scope of work or the statement of work of the procurement, but then again, we need to have the system that allow us to do changes whenever needed, because definitely we will need some changes. Most of the time, 90% of the time, there will be changes. This is inevitable in any project, and mark this as a golden rule. In any project and in any procurement, change is inevitable. Change will take place. So you need to have a good system to manage the change and to control the change. Now, of course, this is again in traditional approaches, the agile approaches, you know how we deal with the change, okay? 3, evaluate the risk of each contract change request. When you get a change request, a contract change request, the supplier asking you to change something or add something or modify something, then you need to consider it carefully and especially consider the risks that might accompany this change, okay? So what kind of threat or opportunity exists within this change request, right? And whether it's worth it to do the change or not. 4, document all contracted changes, of course, and incorporate any effects of the changes into the project plan. Now, of course, if a change is to take place, then I need to make sure that all project documents and all project management plans will be updated according to the change. 5, develop and implement an effective performance reporting system for the seller. Of course, we need to measure the performance of the seller. So we need to set metrics that are important to us. And we ask the seller to submit the progress reports, including those metrics that we will use to measure the performance of the seller. And at the end of the contract, these metrics will be used in order to, consider the seller a good fit for future contracting, or probably, or maybe possibly blacklist them if the performance was bad, okay? Other point is that in the contract, specify any performance reporting specifications to be imposed on the seller. Again, it's about performance and reporting. And set performance milestones to monitor the project progress. You need to set milestones. So, and measure the progress according or against those milestones. So basically, you should not allow the seller, to submit their performance reports according to their wish. No, you have like a set of milestones, a checkpoints that they should submit their progress reports at these points. And if the work is performed at another site, you should do what? You should conduct site visits, not only take the contractor progress reports for granted and trust the reports only. No, you need to conduct site visits to determine how the seller's work is progressing. And finally, you should submit approved invoices for payment in accordance with the contract and the project's payment system. When the job is done, when the milestone has been met, then you need to approve the invoices. You should not delay the invoices. And this is a common problem that we notice all the time, with the contractual relationships, which is the delay of the payments, which would eventually reflect into a bad relationship and a bad behavior probably, and a lack of trust between the two parties because of this. So whenever it's possible and whenever the seller submits their work and we verify it and we validate it and it's accepted, then we should approve the payments as soon as possible. Okay, again, we're looking for win-win situation. So basically, this is important for everybody to be a winner in this contractual relationship. Okay. As for controlling the procurement and the control procurement process, so this is the process of managing procurement relationships, monitoring contract performance, making changes and corrections as appropriate, and closing out the contracts. This is again another important point. Procurements are not only closed at the end of the project. No, procurements should be closed whenever the seller finishes their work. So if they finishes their work, I should close this procurement. You should not keep it open until the end of the project. Okay. So basically, this includes project plan execution to formally sanction the seller's work to begin at the appropriate time. I need to monitor and make sure that the sellers will start at the proper time. The performance reporting that we have mentioned. I should also do quality control, inspect the products, make sure that the products meet the contract objectives, conduct the change control according to the change control management system that we have set, and monitor and control project risks to make sure that risks are properly also managed with the contractor or with the seller. And here let's indicate what kind of contract changes that you might come through. So basically, there are certain different types of contract changes that you might end up with. The first type of contract change is the administrative change. And this is basically when we ask, or when the supplier asks any party, either of the parties, ask for an administrative change, which means the way that we manage the contract. Like for instance, they ask to change the meeting hour, for instance, or the meeting days, or they ask to change the reporting or the report template that they use. So these are administrative changes. This is not a change in the scope, for instance. This is not a change in the core job that they are doing. No, this is an administrative change of how we manage the relationship. Okay. So this is one type of changes. The other type of changes is the contract modification. Now this is a core change that, and a substantive change to the scope, for instance, or to the requirements that have been submitted, and so on. So basically here, one party is asking for a change that will affect all the plans, probably, or many plans, many project management plans, and also will affect the project documents, the different project documents. So this is a substantive change that again would be necessary for the project to work, or for the product to work, and for the project to succeed. It's important, right? The other type is supplemental agreement, which is an additional agreement. So this is basically like an attachment to the original contract that we need, for instance, the supplier to add extra work or to do something additional to the original contract that we have basically agreed on before. So we negotiate and add another work to the contract separately. Another type of change is the constructive, or the constructive change, which are changes that the buyer might have caused through action or inaction. So basically, those might be changes that the seller think are necessary for the project or for the product to work well, although not included in the scope of work, or not even clear in the scope of work, but they should be done. So this is basically a constructive change that the seller would do, and then will submit a claim to claim, you know, the additional cost or additional time that they needed to do this change, which is again necessary from the point of view of the seller for the project to success, or for the product to work well. And the last type of changes is the termination of contract. Now, this is, of course, not a change. This is a termination, you know, and we basically try to avoid this as much as possible. You don't actually want to reach to that point where you will need to terminate the contractor, because terminating the contractor means that we will need to again develop probably a new statement of work, a new procurement management plan, and advertise it, and then conduct the procurement again, and so on and so forth. It's going to be a new procurement cycle that will take a lot of time and a lot of efforts that you don't want really to do. So basically, you try to avoid this as much as possible, and you do it specifically when there is no hope, you know, when there is no way that the contractor will do the job that you need them to do per the quality that you need them to achieve, and so on. So there is poor performance, there is poor quality, there is, I don't know, unethical behavior, for instance. So these are the things that you cannot tolerate. And basically, if you don't find any other way around it, then you do it. You need to terminate the contract with the supplier and go again and plan for the continuing the work, and continuing the work with a new contractor. So again, we're going to go through the cycle as I mentioned before. Okay. Now, as I mentioned as well, contracting involves two parties in a legal relationship. And for this reason, it's very important for you as a project manager to be very considerate and take and pay attention to the legal concepts that will come with this contractual relationship. So basically, you need to be sure of the legal terms that we will use in the contract. And as a rule of thumb, whenever you have a doubt, whenever there's something that you probably don't understand in the contract, any of the terms, any of the conditions, any of, legal terms that you might face, then you should consult an expert, right? A legal expert, whether it's, again, you might have a legal department in the organization itself, or you might need to use the services of a legal or a lawyer office then, but you need to consult somebody, especially if the project, involves millions and millions of dollars. Then you need to be very careful with the legal terms and with the legal conditions and, how to manage the disputes and so on. Okay. Now, here are some legal terms that you need to, of course, to be aware of. Warranty. What is a warranty? When we ask the supplier to provide a warranty for their products, what do we mean by a warranty? A warranty is a promise, explicit or implied, that goods or services that the supplier will submit will meet a predetermined standard that we have agreed on. And the standard may cover reliability, fitness for use, safety, performance, and other things. So basically, this is what defines a warranty. And when we ask a seller to provide a warranty, then we, of course, we should, or we better do it in written, so and explicitly, not only implied. Okay. Another legal term is the waiver. What is the waiver? It's the giving up of contract rights. When you give up advertently or inadvertently your right in the contract. For instance, your right in the contract is to receive this product by the 1st of October. But the seller did not submit the deliverable by the 1st of October. If you ignored this, then you waived your right. If you didn't, submit a cease and desist letter, if you don't submit a warning for the supplier, then you have waived your right, for legal action, because it's your right by the contract, per the contract, it's your right to receive this product or to receive this deliverable by the 1st of October. So if you don't receive it, then it's your right, for instance, to apply a penalty as per the contract again. But if you waived it, then you cannot claim it after that, right? So this is the waiver, and you need to take care with the waivers, right? Breach of contract. This is when one of the two parties does not comply with some of their obligations that were mentioned in the contract, right? So it might result in damages, and damages might be paid to the injured party, litigation or other ramification. Okay, so also it's about, doing, every party should be doing their responsibilities and the roles that the contract has indicated. Another legal term, important legal term, is cease and desist, C&D or cease and desist. This is basically a letter or a warning letter that you submit to the supplier when they do something wrong. So you ask them to stop, cease. Cease means stop any illegal activities or any wrongdoing, and not undertake them again, desist. Otherwise, there will be legal action. Okay, so this is kind of warning letter that you use when the seller does something wrong or does not comply with their roles and responsibilities in the contract, when they breach the contract. Okay, so these are important legal terms that you need to keep in mind. Now, a lot in many scenarios, there might be disputes arising between the buyer and the seller. Okay, here are some guidelines for handling disputes. First of all, Have a good understanding of the differences between important legal terms. Again, you need to make sure that you understand the legal terms right. You understand what's the meaning of warranty. You understand what's the meaning of breach. You understand what's the meaning of a waiver. If you're not sure, always consult an expert, a legal expert about the contract terms, the contract conditions, and so on. Number 2, be sure to consult with somebody in your company's legal department, as I mentioned. Number 3, if your contract isn't written specifically to exclude any inadvertent waivers, then avoid doing the following, because this is considered, again, waivers. Even if you didn't mean to do that, it's inadvertent, but it's still considered as a waiver. Still consider that you have waived your right. So don't do them. Don't accept a product that fails to meet the standards for quality or performance. If you accept that, then you have waived your right, okay? Don't accept late deliveries. Don't overlook an aspect of non-conformance to contractual obligations. If you do that, again, this means that you have waived your right, okay? Any questions so far, ladies and gentlemen? And as I mentioned before, you need to close the procurement. When the contract terms of the procurement have been satisfied by the seller and the buyer, you should not keep the contract open. You should close the procurement. And this occurs throughout the project life cycle, not at the end of the project, okay? Contracts should not be open any longer than necessary. Otherwise, you might get additional charges. The supplier might submit, additional charges, or might submit that, for instance, that the continuous opening the contract has damaged them in some way. So they might claim some right for a damage that they have, that you have caused them. So basically, you don't want to go into this, chaos. You should close the procurement as soon as it finishes and the supplier fulfills the requirement. And this is done by providing a written notice that we usually provide to the seller. So it's from the buyer to the seller once the contract is complete, and it's usually documented in terms and conditions that were specified in the contract. And again, procurements can be closed at any time, not only at the project end. These are some guidelines to close procurements. 1, ensure all required products and services were provided by the seller as per the contract, as per the quality standard. Make sure that any buyer furnished property or information was returned. So if the seller was using any property or information for the buyer, then they have returned it. Settle any outstanding contractual issues. If there are any issues, if there are any claims, if there are any disputes, then they should be settled before we can close the procurement. Conduct a procurement audit to identify successes and failures. Again, we need to create lessons learned. Was the relationship with this supplier successful or not? Should we use this supplier again in the future or not? Sorry. And evaluate the performance of the seller. So again, it's an audit, and again, audit focuses on the process, especially with the procurement. Okay. Address any outstanding invoices and payments and settle them. Archive the complete contract file with the project archives. Again, records are important. Archiving is important. Provide the seller with a formal written notice that the contract has been completed, and communicate that all procurements have been closed, and update the organizational process assets as needed. Okay, and with this we conclude managing or executing and controlling the procurement. Any question? Great. Let's move on to another aspect when you execute the project work, which is managing compliance. And again, we have developed a compliance management plan, a subsidiary management plan of the project management plan. And sometimes it's very important to develop, which is the compliance, how to make sure that we will comply with internal and external compliance requirements. Okay, so this includes analyzing the consequences of the non-compliance, quality assurance outputs to make sure that we are complying all the time, and escalation procedures if compliance requires an intervention from a higher level, then we need to escalate the issue of compliance that we are facing. So basically, here are some guidelines to analyze the consequences of non-compliance, to identify and manage legal, regulatory, and other compliance requirements. You need to define, again, as per the plan, the legal, regulatory, and other constraints and the business rules that you need to follow and how to make sure of compliance. You need to define parts of the potential solution that need to meet a certain compliant requirements, their scope, and how to make sure that they will meet the compliance requirements, and who are the stakeholders who are responsible for reviewing and approving and signing off those requirements and the components compliance. You need to track and manage the review and approval activities related to these requirements, and you need to track and manage the risks of non-compliance. Okay. And to do that, you probably need to monitor the quality assurance outputs. Okay, and quality assurance, as you know, is always about prevention. And this is what we are trying to do here. When we focus on compliance, we try to prevent issues from happening, right? By making sure of complying. So as the project team produces deliverables, the quality assurance will review the deliverables, verify that the deliverables meet the functional and non-functional requirements, and identify and suggest improvements, again, to prevent any discovered, for instance, issue from taking place again. Okay, so QA, quality assurance, validates whether deliverables align with the compliance requirements and provide feedback on how to improve the process and how to meet the compliance requirements all the time. And as the project continues, you need to monitor the QA reports and recommendations and coordinate with the project team to address any defects or any issues. Now, if this requires an intervention from a higher management level, then this is what we will do. We will escalate. So if the project manager and the team can resolve it at their level, then they will resolve it. But if not, then they need to escalate it to the higher level to address it. Okay. Again, you need to identify who are those stakeholders that will be responsible for reviewing the issues, the non-compliance issues, and how the team will proceed. And there might be a certain procedure that you need to follow when there's an issue or issues that need to be escalated. Okay, and this is also integrates with the risk planning, because if we cannot maintain compliance, then this is a risk. As you know, there will be a negative impact on the project and probably on the products or deliverables, and we need to create a risk response plan for that. Okay. So here are some guidelines to measure the compliance. You need to measure the compliance of the project. Of course, you can use the quality assurance outputs to confirm deliverables and process compliance. You would establish project tolerances. So what is permissible, what is not permissible, what happens when we reach the tolerance, what kind of corrective actions that we can take if we go beyond the tolerances or the tolerance levels. We need to establish a clear quality management plan and execute it and monitor it on ongoing basis to make sure that we uncover any non-compliance issues. We need to establish where external audit teams can confirm and validate use of appropriate processes, procedures. And we need to leverage effective quality assurance tools and techniques that we have explained when we explain the quality planning. So the different quality assurance tools that we have explained, you need again to select the proper tools that you can use in your project. You need to do this tailoring and to make sure that the tools that you are using will help you meet the compliance requirements. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, any question? As I mentioned again, if you notice, all what we're doing is basically repeating most of the things that we have explained in planning, right? Because in planning, when we developed the project management plan, we established all of the basic concepts, right? On all of the basic, definitions and terms and so on. So basically what we're doing here is that we are iterating, those definitions and those terms and providing but them in the context of executing and monitoring and controlling. So there is really not a lot of new information there, but only, the emphasis of executing and monitoring and controlling. So let's take a few questions for review. First question is, strategy, methodology, and risk-related roles and responsibilities are all elements of what? Risk register, risk management plan, risk report, project documents. What do you think? Strategy, methodology of how to manage the risk-related roles and responsibilities. The who and how, right? This is again the who and how we will manage risk. So basically it's what? When we talk about the who and how, yeah, this is the risk management plan, of course. Okay, question number 2. Yasmin is a project manager tasked with putting together a project charter for a project that will produce a new line of widgets for the company. After meeting with various key stakeholders, she sat down to draft the document. Yasmin is likely to include all of the following elements within the project charter, except for which of the following will not be included in the project charter? List of detailed risks, purpose of the project, list of key stakeholders, pre-approved budget. What is the thing that we will not include in the project charter? What do you think? Yes, excellent. So basically, again, the charter is a high-level document. There is no details of anything in the charter, right? So list of detailed risk is not something to include in the charter. Pre-approved budget, yes, can be mentioned in the charter. There is a high-level budget that is approved that can be indicated in the project charter. Okay, another question. A project manager facilitates a meeting with the project team to review an assessment of the risks recently completed. During this meeting, they evaluate options for responding to the risks. It's decided that 2 risks will not receive any action and that they will deal with the consequences at the time of occurrence, should they occur, in case they occur. What type of risk response is this? Passive acceptance, active acceptance, mitigation, avoidance. So what type of risk response when you decide to do nothing about the risk and wait until it takes place. And then you figure out what you can do. What kind of risk response do you call this? Yes, this is a passive acceptance. So we accept the risks. We don't develop any options to deal with the risks. We wait. Our only strategy is to wait and see if the risks take place or not. And then we figure them out. So this is basically what? Passive acceptance that you should avoid as much as possible, right? Yeah, but sometimes you have no other option. You only wait and hope and pray that the risks will not take place, okay? Okay, another question. A project manager is performing quantitative risk analysis. Quantitative, not qualitative, quantitative. What tangible result is likely to be produced out of this quantitative risk analysis? An assessment of probability and impact for each individual risk, a priority level for each individual project risk, an assessment of overall project risk exposure, a list of potential risk responses. What do you think? Quantitative risk analysis, where we take a lots of probabilities and we assume a lots of scenarios, you know, simulation, right? Modeling and simulation and expected monetary value, and we see how the outputs will change. So basically this will give what? This will give only the result of individual risk taking place or many risks with many probabilities taking place at the same time or at different times. This is not only an individual risk analysis. This is an analysis for the whole risks that might take place in the project, right? Yes. So what is the correct answer? An assessment of overall project risk exposure. Yes, exactly. Another question. Karina is a principal project manager of You've Got Dogs, company that is named You've Got Dogs, a specialty company that creates custom dog apparel and toys. As part of her latest project, she interviews experienced subject matter experts to better understand what risks exist within the project. What project management process is she carrying out? Plan risk management, identify risks, perform qualitative risk analysis, perform quantitative risk analysis. What is she trying to do here? Meeting experts and asking them what could happen. This is what? Yes, basically this is identify risks. Excellent. Another question. Contract phases are closely related to the project procurement management knowledge area processes. Which of the following are true? Select 3. Okay. The requirement stage, which establishes the project and contract needs, is related to the plan procurement management process when you plan for the procurement. So this maps to the requirement stage phase. The requisition stage, where responses to procurement documents are reviewed, is related to conduct procurements. C, the award stage, where the contract is awarded, is related to the conduct procurements process. D, 2 of the outputs of the plan procurement management process are inputs to the conduct procurement process. Now there are 3 correct statements and 1 incorrect statement. What is the incorrect statement here? What do you think is the incorrect statement here? Let's look at them. Okay. Requirement stage when we identify the requirement that we need in the contract, this is maps to the plan, right? So it makes sense, right? Okay. Let's see D. Now D, I might not be sure of the number, but of number 2, of course, I mean, but there is a general correct context, which is outputs of the planning will be inputs to the execution, which is conduct, procurement process, right? So basically it makes sense. The outputs of planning will be inputs to conducting, executing, right? So D is correct, sounds correct too. B and C, when we talk about awarding a contract, is this execution or not? When we execute, when we conduct the procurement, don't we award the contract, which is the C? Yes, because conducting the procurement means awarding a contract, right? So C also sounds correct, and we're left only with B, because reviewing procurement documents, only reviewing, procurement documents is not related to conduct, because conducting means, awarding the contract. Okay, so for that reason, you have A, C, and D are the correct statements, while B is not correct. Okay. Okay, another question. Midway through the delivery of development services, a customer requested that new requirements be incorporated. When asked to submit a change request to modify the terms of the contract, the customer refused and insisted that the changes be implemented at no cost. So the customer wants the changes to be implemented without any additional cost. After multiple discussions, neither party changed their stance on the situation. What technique will the project manager likely use to address this situation? Is it claims administration? Is it alternative dispute resolution, ADS? Is it inspection, or is it conflict management? Now, we have probably not explained that in details, but we can do something, right? If you are now in the exam, you can think in this way. Inspection, will inspection solve any problem between us and the customer? Would inspection do anything? No. So inspection is not correct. Conflict management is here, the situation is about a conflict, or is it about a dispute? It's not about a conflict. It's not about, different opinions that we can just ignore and go. No, there is here a legal dispute that we cannot, oversee or overlook. So basically, conflict management will not help you here too. You need something that will resolve this issue from a legal perspective, right? Okay. Now here's a rule. When you have a dispute, this is what we call a dispute in the contract, right? We have a dispute between the buyer and the seller. What do you do? Your first option all the time with a dispute is to try to reach a negotiated settlement. So we try to negotiate until we reach a settlement, a solution that we agree on, okay? But this option is not mentioned here, negotiated settlements, or basically in the scenario, it's clear that we tried negotiating a settlement and we failed. Okay, so this leaves us with the other two options, which is alternative dispute resolution. So basically, when we fail in negotiating a settlement, we try to assign someone, a third party, that would provide a consultation and judgment of what alternative can be done or can be used to resolve this dispute. Okay, but again, the scenario here does not indicate any third party or any, type of moderation to the situation. So what the scenario here indicates is a dead end, right? We are stick to our position that the customer should pay us for the extra time and for the extra cost, and the customer also is sticking to their opinion, to their perception that this should be done without any extra cost. Okay, so in this case, we are left with only one option, which is what? We need to do a legal action. We need to, this is claims administration. So basically we need to do a claims administration to prepare for the legal action, because here it's definitely we're going for a legal action. Okay, so basically we are here in claims administration. This is what we should be doing. Okay, another question. You are the project manager for an outdoor concert event scheduled for 1 year from today. You're working on the procurement documents for the computer software program that will control the lighting and screen projections during the concert. You've decided to contract with a professional services company that specializes in writing custom software programs. You want to minimize the risk to the organization and want a well-defined set of deliverables for a set price. You have agreed to pay the vendor a bonus if they complete the program at least 30 days earlier than scheduled. So you'll opt for which contract type? What is the contract type here that you have selected? When you agreed that you will pay the company a fixed amount of money and a bonus if they achieve a certain target. What is the name of this contract? Yes, it's a fixed price incentive fee. Yes, it's a fixed price, but plus bonus means plus incentive. So fixed price incentive fee. Yes, this is the correct answer. Excellent. Any question, ladies and gentlemen? Hope that everything is clear to you. And let's take 15 minutes break and continue after that. Thank you. And now that we have concluded the procurement and compliance, let's move to another aspect in execution and monitoring and controlling, which is manage project issues. Basically, we explained how to tackle risks in the project, in the planning phase. Now, some of these risks, which have, of course, negative impact, which are threats, when they take place in the project, they become issues, right? And you need to deal with those issues. So let's have a look at what project issues are and how do you compare risks versus issues and how to resolve issues in the project. So what are issues, or what is issue by definition? The issue is a current condition or situation that may have an impact on the project objectives. In other words, it's an action item that we need to address, that we need to resolve. Okay, so for instance, there's a scope change control that we need to take or not take, approve or disapprove. There's a schedule slippage. There is a delay in the schedule. There is a cost overrun, for instance. There is a variance that exceeds the tolerance in the project scope, for instance. There is issues inequalities. There are risks that took place that negatively impact the project. There are issues in the procurement. There are issues in the communication. So issues can affect different aspects of the project, and we need to tackle them. We need to attack them. We need to resolve them as soon as possible. Now, this is a golden rule. The later that the issue is resolved, the more expensive it is. So basically, issues should be resolved as soon as possible. If you allow them to continue, the cost of resolving those issues will increase. Okay? Take this rule and apply it even in your personal life. When you allow the issue to continue, it will become more and more expensive to resolve. That's why we need to resolve the issues as soon as possible. Now, how do we compare risks against issues? Risks are things that we anticipate or forecast to happen in the future. We are not sure. Maybe they will take place, maybe they will occur, maybe they will not occur. We don't know. While issues are things that happened already. They are in the present. We are suffering them. Okay? Risks can be negative or positive. Issues are always negative. They negatively impact the project and the project objectives. Risks are documented in the risk register, while issues are documented in an issue log. We will see a template of the issue log later on. Okay? Risks response is called risk response, right? While issues responses to issues are called workaround. So when you have an issue, you look for a workaround to resolve this issue, okay? Now, this is a template of an issue log that you can use in order to identify and to track the issues in the project, okay? So this is used to track problems, inconsistencies, conflicts that occur during the life of the project and require investigation. This is a template again, you can tolerate it. So you have an ID for the issue, description of the issue. Opened means when have we identified this issue, when have we discovered this issue. Due date, that we will try our best to resolve the issue by. So basically this is the due date that the issue should be resolved by. Okay, priority for the issue can be assigned as well, low, medium, high, for instance. Owner of the issue, so this is the person, this is the team member that is responsible, that has been assigned to resolve this issue. The response, if there is a response or a workaround, as we mentioned, then we write it here. What is the workaround that we are trying to resolve the issue? The status of the issue, is it open, so it's there, or is it closed, we have resolved it? And any other comments can also be added to this risk register. Okay. So again, whenever an issue arises, it should be promptly added. You should add it immediately to the issue log. Each issue should have an owner who is responsible for resolving the issue and finding a workaround, and he should or she should report back to the project manager of the status of the issue. Due date should be identified, should be realistic, and the risk owner will try their best to resolve the issue by this date. Issues should be a regular topic of every status meeting. So whenever we have project status meeting, we discuss issues. What are the issues? What are the open issues in the project, and how are we proceeding in resolving those issues? Don't hesitate to escalate the issue to the project sponsor if it begins to have a major effect on the project. Then you need to escalate it to the project sponsor, and this is actually one of the responsibilities. As you remember that the project sponsor is also the person that advocates and defends the project and basically provides the project with the support needed to face any big issues. Okay. Guidelines to resolving issues. Use your organization issue log. So basically, you might use the template that we have seen, or you might develop your tolerated issue log, or if the PMO has a template that can provide you with, then use your organization template. Train project team members to promptly report potential issues. Now, this is very important because, again, early discovery helps resolving the issue at a cheap cost. Okay, but if we discover the issue late, then the cost of resolving the issue will be high. And that's why I need to educate team members to report those issues. In so many organizations, those who announce or those who report issues are shamed and blamed. And this is very wrong, because this teaches them to try to hide issues or not report them. You need to give the team members a safe environment for them to report issues in order to be able to resolve them again as soon as possible. This is very important for you as a leader, to give the team a safe environment for them to discuss and report issues. Okay. Enter the issue when identified in the issue log and assign an owner and a due date. Monitor progress. You need to monitor the progress of resolving the issue in every project status meeting. Develop a workaround. Assess the impact of the workaround. We need to assess the impact of the workaround that we will apply to resolve the issue. Will it have an impact on the cost, for instance? Will it have an impact on the schedule? Then probably it might trigger a change request as well. Okay. Approve the response or get it approved if it needs approval from a higher level in the management, and close the issue when the issue is resolved. Okay. So these are the guidelines that you need to maintain when tracking and resolving issues. Any question? Okay. Let's move on now to a very important also aspect of the project management, which are the changes in the project, right? And managing project changes. And this is, you always get questions. Probably most of the time, 90% of the time in the PMP exams, you will get questions about change management. This is very important, okay? So the culture and structure impact that would probably trigger those changes. Causes of changes, the project management plan updates, training, change strategy that we can follow, and change process flow chart as an example of how to manage changes in the project. Okay. Now let's start with some guidelines to manage project changes. First of all, make sure that you have a change control system. Again, this is very important, and this is usually indicated in the change management plan. How to process changes, how to process change requests in the project. And you need to make sure that this system is cost effective, is not or will not take a lot of approvals, take a lot of discussions, and eventually be very costly, will add cost because these meetings, of course, take time, and time is money, right? So you need to make sure that you have a good system that is cost effective for managing changes. To establish or make use of an existing CCB, Change Control Board. And this is again indicated by the change management plan. Who are the persons, who are the stakeholders that will be members of the CCB, of this Change Control Board, and when will they meet, and how they take decisions about change requests, okay? 3, document the effects of the change on the applicable baselines. If there will be effects, then I need to, or impact to the baselines, then I need to identify them and document them. Obtain approval from appropriate parties for all change requests before implementing them. Use configuration management, which is again a part of the change management, to document and control changes to original project characteristics. So what are the things that have changed? We need to, again, to track all these changes, right? Use performance reports to measure project performance. Identify corrective actions necessary to bring expected performance in line with the plan. Update the plan to reflect the changes, if the changes get approved, of course, and update the baselines as well. And a very important thing, document the causes of variances. Why did we need to initiate this change in the first place? What is the lessons learned, or what are the lessons learned? We need to document them, and we need to add them to the lessons learned register so we can use them in future projects, okay? And why did we take these decisions, for instance, to deal with those changes? So any type of lessons learned can also be taken and documented in the lessons learned register, okay? Now, a very important source for change to requests is the culture and structure of the company, right? So basically, every organization has its own culture and structure of how to deal with changes. Some organizations are very flexible, are very agile, while other organizations are very rigid, formal, and they have a lengthy and bureaucratic process of handling changes. So again, you will need to follow your OPA, right? You need to follow your organization culture and structure, and follow the practice that is used in your organization. Causes of project changes. What might cause a project change? Inaccurate initial estimates. When we developed the estimates, we didn't have enough details, so we ended up probably with inaccurate initial estimates that we need to correct, and for that reason we will initiate a change request. Specification changes. Maybe the customer made some changes to the specifications of the product. New regulations, new laws that also will require us to do some changes, or missed requirements that we did not identify, or we haven't identified properly when we collected the requirements of the project. Okay, so all of these can cause project changes. The internal business environment as well can cause changes and impact the scope of the project. So for instance, when you have a restructuring in your organization, then some of the requirements might change, the process might change, the business plans might be changed again, and this might trigger change requests. Okay, so the need of new deliverables, reprioritization of existing deliverables, elimination of deliverables that are no longer needed, all of these can be causes also to trigger and initiate changes in the project. There are also external business environment factors that might lead to initiating change requests, such as political factors, economic factors, legal factors, social factors. We discussed those before. This is what we call the PESTLE analysis, right? So these factors also can contribute to triggering changes in the project. Okay. Now, here are some guidelines to recommend, plan, and facilitate change. Establish a single way changes are requested. So you need to establish a clear channel of who can request change and how they can request change, right? And what's the template, for instance, that should be used when requesting change. This can include description of the proposed change, its business value, any risk or risk mitigation recommendation, and cost of change. This can be included in the template, right? Ensure that a CCB, a change control board, can assess the change cost, risk, and value, and other potential impacts to the project. The size of the change and project tolerances will determine if the project manager can take a decision solely, individually, or he or she needs to escalate to the CCB. So for certain, little minor, little impacted changes, you might take the decision yourself. As a project manager, you don't need to escalate those changes to the CCB, for instance. But for other major changes, you need to escalate. So this is what the tolerance defines, okay? What decisions can you make? And this is what the governance, again, we explained that when we explained the project governance. One of the things that the project governance set is the decision-making process. So for instance, what changes can the project manager take decision without referring back to the CCB, and what changes should the project manager escalate to the CCB if required, okay? Sometimes you're required as a project manager as well to provide a compelling business case for the change. If the change is positive, if the change will create a business value that is very important, then you need probably as a project manager to develop a business case for the change and communicate the vision of the change to other stakeholders in order, to help them take the right decision of approving this positive change. And ensure changes are properly aligned and updates to other artifacts like the plans and training plans and so on. All of the artifacts is properly done. Because, when something changes, this is an integration process, right? If you change, for instance, the requirements, then this will affect the cost, the scope, the schedule, probably the quality, the resources, and so on. So you need to make sure that all the artifacts of the project will be updated as well, okay? For instance, the training plan should be updated, right? So the scope of training, knowledge transfer required, roles and responsibilities of the stakeholders, training timelines, and so on can be updated and probably should be updated as well. Now, here is the general change control strategy you can follow, okay? So we start all the time by identifying the change, the required change. We identify it, or any of the stakeholders can identify it. And then we document it. And then we analyze the impact of it, the impact on the objectives of the project, on the project objectives. What's the impact on the cost? What's the impact on the scope? What's the impact on the schedule? And what's the impact on the quality? Those are the main four, again, constraints that we need to look at, okay? So what the change or how the change can impact those four objectives, okay? And then, and after identifying the impact, the course of action that we need to do, whether to approve or reject the change. And then if the change is approved, then you need to update all the artifacts, including the plans, okay? This is an example, a general flow chart on how to process change requests. Okay, let's have a look at it. So basically, you set, again, a clear channel for receiving change requests from stakeholders. So basically, you might, or one of the stakeholders can initiate a change, so we call them change initiators, okay? So there's a change request form that they can fill in, and they initiate, the change, and the project manager the first step is what? Is to log the change request in the change log. So we have a document that is called change log, where the project manager logs and documents all change requests. So the first step is to log the change request. And then the first question, change request passes some initial filters. We can put some initial filters, for instance, if the change is not aligned with the project objectives, this is a very important filter, right? If the change does not align with the project objectives, then it will be immediately rejected. And we will send the rejection, of course, notice to the initiator. And we will document the result of the change request, which is disapproved or rejected, okay? So I can start by setting some initial filters, like alignment with project objectives, alignment with business objectives and value, any other initial objectives. You might find this is number one filter, that if the change request does not meet, then immediately it will be rejected. Okay, now another filter might be, will the change affect the deliverables of the project? If no, then again we will reject the change, because it does not affect the deliverable directly or indirectly. This might be another filter that you need to take into consideration, okay? Now, if the answer is yes, the change will affect the deliverable, then the project manager prepares an impact statement for change requests. So the project manager prepares or identifies the impact of this change, how this change will impact the cost, how this change will impact the schedule, how this change will impact the quality, for instance, and so on. So we'll prepare this impact, and according to the authorization level of the project manager, and according to the project governance that we have set when we developed the charter, if it's a minor impact, if the minor that the project manager has identified is, for instance, very little, it's a minor impact, then the project manager can take the decision alone. So we were discussing this example of a flow chart of how to deal with changes. So basically, again, I think we were discussing that the project manager should prepare an impact statement. And based on the impact, if it's a minor, then probably the project manager can take the decision alone. If it's a moderate impact, then project manager maybe needs to consult with 1 or 2 stakeholders, probably the project sponsor. And if it's a major impact, then we might need to escalate this to the change control board. And then the decision is made whether to reject the change or approve the change. Now, if the change is approved, then you need to build and communicate the change to all stakeholders so they get to know that the change has been approved. You need, of course, to also update all the artifacts, all the plans, all the project documents that are affected by the change. You need to execute the change and rebalance the project. Okay, so again, the sequence of these, these steps is very important as well, and you will probably get questions in the exam about the steps of how to implement a change or how to attack a change request in the project. Okay, any question? Okay, so when we get the changes approved, when we have approved change requests, they are scheduled for implementation. They can be, again, corrective actions to adjust the performance of the project work. They can be preventive actions to ensure that the future performance of the project work will align with the plan. They can be defect repairs to modify in conformance with the project, or they can be updates that is needed to modify, for instance, the project deliverable, and this will modify, of course, the project plan and the project documents. Okay, so again, if the change request is approved, you need to update the plan based on the scope of the changes. And this might include updates to the scope, updates to the schedule, updates to the work packages, updates to the team member assignments, and so on. Okay, in agile projects, lower value deliverables might be moved out of the scope completely because we need to focus on the prioritized, right, the most valuable user stories, and this will take place all the time in the agile project. So let's again discuss some agile considerations when it comes to change. You know exactly how we deal with agile, with changes in agile projects. Of course, we understand the organizational context and what triggers the change, what are the internal and external factors that might trigger the changes, how is the project projectized, and what is the project governance model. And the product owner is again responsible for identifying the value of the different items in the product backlog and reprioritizing them according to the highest value. And this takes place in every sprint, right? And every sprint planning meeting can also take place in the release planning as well. So basically, the product owner is the person responsible for these changes and making sure of focusing on value, on delivering the highest value as soon as possible and throughout the project life cycle. The demos, which is the sprint demo, the meeting that we do at the last day in the sprint or in the iteration, is also an opportunity to identify required changes. You know, when the team demonstrate to the product owner the work that they have done and the product owner validates and tests, then we might find out certain things that need to be changed. Okay, so this is again an opportunity to identify necessary changes that the product owner might decide to do, and this is again allow for quick and continuous feedback. That is important also to increase the value of delivery and the performance of the project as a whole. Again, we are focusing on the business value and delivering the value. Okay, this or the decision is owned by the product owner, but there is always negotiations with the other team members in order to set the right expectations and identify the proper changes that can be done. This also might result in an updated roadmap. So for instance, the releases can change, you know, the milestones can change, the deliverables can change, and so on, again, according to the value and the business value that the product owner identifies. Okay. Any questions so far, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. Let's take again 15 minutes break. 15 minutes break before we continue on to managing project knowledge. Thank you and see you in 15 minutes. Let's move on now to, again, managing a new aspect while executing and monitoring and controlling the project, which is manage project knowledge. And this is, again, a very important aspect that we need to focus on, especially when we start executing the project and monitoring and controlling the project and measuring the performance of the project, because this is where you start to get a lot of information, as we mentioned. And this information can be translated into knowledge. And this is a very important asset, the knowledge, of course, I mean, that you need to maintain and you need to transfer as well. So this is what we will be discussing right here. Types of knowledge. What are the two types of knowledge? Knowledge management and transfer. Responsibilities in managing and transferring the knowledge, and the lessons learned register as a tool to manage and transfer knowledge. Now, first of all, there are two types of knowledge. There is the explicit knowledge, which is the knowledge that can be documented and shared with others. It's very easy to document it or codify it, we call this also, and share it with others. But there is another type of knowledge, which is the tacit knowledge, which is the personal knowledge that can be difficult to express and articulate and cannot be documented, such as beliefs, insights, experience, and it's essential to provide context to the explicit knowledge. So basically, this knowledge cannot be documented, cannot be codified. In order to transfer it, you need to use your personal experience, you need to provide context, you need to provide insights, and so on. So this is what we call the tacit knowledge, and it's also important as well. So we have the explicit knowledge and the tacit knowledge. Now, knowledge management should take place on three levels: the individual level, the project level, and the organization level. The individual level, each team member needs to know how to perform the work assigned to them, right? So they need to acquire the knowledge needed by, for instance, researching, by collaborating with others in the team, and by examining and benefiting from the knowledge repository, the OPA, that exists within the organization. So this is at the individual level. The second level is the project, where the focus is achieving the project objectives. So the project manager here solicits the knowledge about other projects that can be used in this project. And the PMO here is the source of this knowledge. that we can use in order to leverage this and increase the chances of success. The third level is the organization, where the focus is to manage programs and portfolios, not only projects. And the program or portfolio manager seeks information from the peers, from their colleagues, okay, managing other programs or projects, in order to, again, to adapt this knowledge and increase success chances. Okay, so these are the three levels where the knowledge management takes place. Knowledge is not constant. It evolves all the time, and every day we might have new information that we need to capture, we need to manage, we need to transfer, and probably for this reason we need all the time to update all of the documents, all of the artifacts in the project. You should not hoard the knowledge. You should share the knowledge, as we mentioned so many times before, right? This is one very important sign of the performing team. How do you know that you have a performing team? When you see them, when you notice them sharing the knowledge. So basically, knowledge should be shared, of course, following the communication management plan and using the appropriate tools, such as face-to-face, which is the best tool again, or telephone, emails, wikis, intranets, printed documents, and so on. Okay. There are different approaches as well to transfer the knowledge, by connecting different persons, by connecting to other people, by sharing the tacit and explicit knowledge. This includes networking with other people with the same interest, facilitating special interest groups meetings, seminars, webinars, virtual meetings, and so on, training, work shadowing and reverse shadowing, observation and conversation, mentoring, coaching. All of these can be approaches that we use to transfer the knowledge, again, within the team of the project, or individually, or at the project level, or at even the organization level. Okay. So responsibilities include: leadership should be communicating the organization's vision and inspiring the project team. Facilitation should be provided to effectively guide a group to resolve or to solve a problem and find a solution. Political awareness, to keep the project manager aware of the environment, and networking with others to share the knowledge on all levels. Lessons learned is, again, a very important tool that you can use to capture the knowledge and to share the knowledge. So basically, both positive and negative experiences should be captured as lessons learned and should be documented in the lessons learned register. Otherwise, you will end up reinventing the wheel. Whenever you have the same problem, you will try again to solve the problem from zero. This is, of course, not desirable. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. So lessons learned is a way to avoid reinventing the wheel. And the amount of time and effort on documenting the lessons learned is worth the ROI. Will have a great return on investment. The time that you will invest in documenting the lessons learned has a very important return. Okay, so we should do it all the time. Now, lessons learned can be classified in categories. For instance, scheduling lessons learned. What are the lessons learned that we have developed when we manage the schedule of the project? Conflict management lessons learned, vendor lessons learned, customer lessons learned, strategic lessons learned, tactical lessons learned, and so on. You might want to classify the lessons learned in different categories for ease of, of sharing, for ease of referring back to. So this would be a good idea to create those categories. You need also to differentiate between the lessons learned register, which is a document that we use to in the project to document all lessons learned, and the repository. The repository is the central database of lessons learned that is maintained by the PMO, the Project Management Office. Okay, so basically, whenever we have a project and we end up with a lessons learned register, the lessons learned register will be added to the lessons learned repository that is maintained by the PMO. Okay, and whenever you need to get back to previous projects lessons learned, then you ask the PMO to provide you with this repository, and the PMO will put this repository at your service. Okay, and this is how we manage and transfer knowledge. Some guidelines. If your organization has a PMO, we follow the guidelines of the PMO to document this knowledge and to manage it, and to manage the knowledge. Be alert to new sources of project management knowledge. All the time you might have new sources of information, new sources of knowledge. So try to capture the most knowledge that you can. Proactively seek new knowledge. Don't wait until the knowledge comes to you. No, you go, try, find, research, find new resources of information, of knowledge, and again, acquire this new knowledge and capture it and manage it and transfer it. Compile lessons learned register throughout the project life cycle, not only at the end of the project. Now, this is very important. Sometimes you might get a question about that. When do we document lessons learned? Some people think that we document lessons learned only at the end of the project. This is very wrong, okay? We document lessons learned throughout the project lifecycle. Whenever we identify a lesson learned, we document it, we add it to the lessons learned register. Why? Because if you postponed it, you will forget it, right? If you wait until the end of the project, you will probably forget most of the lessons learned that we went through. So basically, this is what you need to do. You need to document lessons learned throughout the project lifecycle. You might have like a regular meeting for documenting lessons learned. Every Thursday, 1 p.m., we have a meeting to review and document lessons learned. Okay? So you do it throughout the project. Excellent. And now let's discuss the emotional intelligence and how the project manager and other stakeholders as well can use their emotional intelligence, EI, to promote performance, especially within the team. And now emotional intelligence is considered a very critical skill that everyone, all stakeholders should develop, not only the project manager, but all stakeholders should develop. And we will see why. Basically, let me explain emotional intelligence to you very simply. Emotional intelligence is about this 4 quadrants. Emotional intelligence has 4 quadrants. It's about you, so self, and others. You and the others. Awareness and control. Okay, so basically, and probably the most important quadrant here is what we call self-awareness. Probably this is the most basic and the most fundamental important skill that you need to develop, is to be self-aware. You understand yourself very well. You recognize your weaknesses and you recognize your strengths, and you're able to motivate yourself internally and work to develop yourself internally based on this awareness, self-awareness. Okay, so self-awareness, and then self-control. You manage and control your behavior based on your self-awareness again. Okay, since you understand yourself well and how your internal senses affect your behavior, then you develop the ability to self-control, to control yourself. For instance, don't take decisions when you're too angry, or when you're too happy, or when you're too emotional. You develop this skill of understanding your internal feelings and controlling them. Okay, and this is what we call the personal skills. So personal skills is about self-awareness and self-control. Now about the others, awareness. So we call this social awareness. So you understand people, how they feel, what are their, you can read people. You can understand their internal feelings, their emotions, right? And you develop also what we call relationship management. So based on your understanding of their emotions, of their internal feelings, you develop a good relationship and you manage a good relationship with them. And we call this interpersonal skills. And this is all about emotional intelligence. So emotional intelligence is about personal skills and interpersonal skills. Personal skills is about self-awareness and self-control. Interpersonal skills is about social awareness and relationship management. Now, of course, there is details, but really we don't need to go through the details. If you understand the most important thing, which is the 4 quadrants, those. Of course, there might be, some variation in the naming, social awareness instead, social skills instead of relationship management, for instance, or self-management instead of self-control, but it's the same, okay? So you have the personal skills, self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, and you have the interpersonal skills under which there are social skills and empathy. Basically, the personal skills, again, come from the self-awareness elements, emotional awareness, so you know your feelings, you perceive connection between the feelings and the behavior, you recognize how emotions affect the performance, you are aware of the values and the goals, you have accurate self-assessment, you know your strengths and weaknesses, you become aware of the blind points, you know emotional triggers, what triggers your emotions, and then you develop also self-confidence. So you express and trust unpopular opinions, for instance. You don't have problem expressing your opinion, even if it's not, if it's something that the people won't like. You don't have a problem with that, right? You take risk. You display self-assurance. You have firm knowledge of your self-esteem and proficiencies. You become decisive. You take decisions correctly. Okay, this is the self-awareness elements. self-regulation elements, self-control, remaining cool under pressure, for instance, staying focused in a stressful environment, controlling destructive emotions that you might have. You develop trustworthiness, acknowledging errors, challenging others' immortal conduct, establishing confidence via reputation and honesty, standing by principles, behaving morally. You develop conscientiousness. You have well-ordered, meticulous approach to work. You become accountable for fulfilling goals. You satisfy obligations and deliver on promises. Adaptability, you develop adaptability. You adapt to changing events. You interpret events in a flexible way. You handle numerous demands and changing priorities. You develop innovation, produce fresh ideas, think out of the box, looking for novel ideas, embrace new approaches, and so on, by self-regulating. Motivating elements, achievement drive, setting goals that are difficult, taking chances and risk, striving hard to get results, discovering how to upgrade skills and capabilities, striving to minimize uncertainty, commitment, making decisions based on team's core principles, searching for opportunities to achieve team's mission, sacrificing to fulfill substantial company goal, so on. Initiative, working above and beyond toward goals, inspiring others, cutting through rules, grabbing opportunities, optimism, hoping to succeed instead of fearing failure, seeking reversals, working toward goals regardless of barriers. Now, so many skills are complementary, they complete each other, they integrate with each other, but this is, as a whole, this is what you develop as personal skills. Empathy elements as interpersonal skills now. You develop empathy elements. You understand others, serve others based on needs, observe emotional clues, listening carefully, displaying tact and appreciating others' points of view. Service orientation, happily provide proper help, understand customers' point of view, seek strategies to increase consumer satisfaction, recognize consumers' needs. You contribute to developing others as well, recognize rewarding associate achievements, provide helpful criticism, coaching, mentoring, leveraging diversity, appreciating various ideologies, various cultures, creating conditions where all kinds of groups can thrive, showing consideration for diverse groups, objecting to discrimination, political awareness, understanding political truths and realities of companies, grasping influences that set opinions of clients, consumers, rivals, recognizing critical social systems, correctly interpreting power connections, diplomatic, understands what's going on in the working environment. Okay. Social skill elements, again, interpersonal skills, communication, managing tough problems directly, effectively exchanging information, cultivate clear communication, achieve mutual awareness, building bonds, relationships, connections, establishing large casual networks, keeping others informed, creating mutually rewarding relationships, collaboration, cooperation with others, cultivate options for cooperation, balancing job duties and professional relationships, working together, sharing strategies and knowledge, change catalyst, challenging current situation to appeal for a change, appreciating importance of change, exhibiting change anticipated of others, conflict management, defecting clashes, moving disputes into open, influence others, polishing presentations, winning people over, building solidarity, leadership skills, stimulating interest for collective visions and goals, modeling effective leadership, taking ownership, directing others' performance, team capabilities, building team character, attracting group members, safeguarding team, and so on. Now, of course, you don't need to memorize this, okay? Only, as I told you in the beginning, only understand the 4 quadrants as a general, and the personal and interpersonal skills, and the importance of this in developing yourself and developing others as well. And when you develop yourself and you develop others as well, then the project performance as a whole will increase, okay? Add to that active listening, which includes reflecting, repeat the gist of the message to verify understanding, attending to the speaker, so lean slightly toward the speaker, stay at the eye level, maintain eye contact, and following, respond with non-verbal gesture or verbal response, ask questions, allow speaker a moment for them to collect their thoughts. Active listening is also important, and so many people, unfortunately, cannot listen. This is very basic skill, and still so many people don't have this skill. Okay, they're not good listeners, and this is very important, especially in business. And those soft skills that include the personal and interpersonal skills have become actually very crucial, very critical for the success of the business as a whole, so that a lot of companies now, when they select their team and their staff, they do personality profile assessment. They start testing, the personality, the soft skills, the personal and interpersonal skills of this person. Before we agree or before we recruit them, we need to understand their personality, whether the personality fits our culture and working environment or not. And they have developed tests for that. We call them psychometric tests or personality profile assessment. And you have different types, like the theory of psychological types, like Myers-Briggs, like the DISC model, like true color methodology, like social style model, like whole brain thinking. All of these are tests, personality profile assessment, to help us identify the soft skills, the personal and interpersonal skills of the person that we consider for the job, or we consider for adding to our working environment, okay? Now, we don't need, again, to go into the details of these theories, but if you have time and you want to, you can go through those different tests and see what kind of personality profile assessments can be done when recruiting or when selecting the right team members for the project. Okay. Feedback is also very important. As a project manager, especially, you need all the time to give feedback to your team and to the stakeholders in general. You need all the time to provide feedback, and feedback can be negative and can be positive, as we mentioned, I think, before. Communication is a two-way process. So it's not only one way. All the time we have to deliver this feedback. Feedback can be positive if the message is received and understood as the sender intended, or can be negative if the receiver did not understand what the sender intended. And I think I mentioned to you, it's always the responsibility of the receiver to ensure that the information was received clearly. It's always the responsibility of the receiver, not the sender, because if there is no feedback, then no feedback provides an implicit acceptance of the message by the receiver. If the receiver did not give any feedback, it means for us that they received the message and they understood the message. Okay. But of course, as a rule of thumb, there should be always a feedback. The receiver should acknowledge that they have received the message and understood the message. Effective feedback should be clear, specific, and offered in a timely manner. Okay. Okay. I think, yeah, it's better we stop here for today, and we leave the other explanations to the next lecture. Any question, ladies and gentlemen? Any question? Good. So, inshallah, see you in our last lecture, Sunday evening. Wishing you a pleasant evening and a nice weekend. Take care and goodbye.